Grace and peace to you from God our Father and from our Lord and our Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. The Bible verse that we'll be looking at this morning for our message is a portion of our gospel lesson. It's Mark chapter 9, verse 35, where it says, Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. And this is God's word. So friends, what does it mean to be great at something? Depends on what field we're talking about being great at, right? If it's professional sports, well, every year, the journalists that cover those sports get together to discuss and decide who's going to be advanced into that sports hall of fame. And for them to decide that, they have always these healthy debates. And part of their debate has to be, well, what constitutes greatness in this sport? Is it statistical dominance in comparison to all the other players of his time? Is it racking up wins, or is it winning championships, or is it some kind of a combination of them? They have to determine what greatness is. Think about it in another field like teaching. What is it that determines if a teacher is great? Is it the grades that the students get? Is it the level of improvement that they show from the beginning of the year through to the end of the year? Is it the relationship that a teacher is able to build with the student and then through the students to their families? Is it the amount of hours that a teacher puts in, or the one who gets the best scores on the standardized tests, and so on? What does it make that makes a great teacher? That's often harder to define, isn't it? Well, in this lesson, Jesus gives us another one to think about. So what is it that makes a great Christian? And that's really what Jesus is inviting us to consider as we look at this verse from the Gospel of Mark. Now, as we dig in here, it's important to know the setting for this verse. You see, Jesus has just revealed to his disciples that he's going to die. It's not the first time he's told them this. It's actually the second time that he's made it known to them. And they're still not sure what to make of it. And I think we can understand why to a degree, because do any of you have a friend who's actually predicted their own death? Who said, 6 months from now, I'm going to die in a shocking and unexpected way? I don't think anybody. We can understand why they were a little confused at what Jesus said. Yet it's on the heels of this announcement from Jesus. They're traveling to the city of Capernaum. And as they're making this journey to the city, do you know what the disciples are doing along the way? They're not talking about what Jesus had said. They're not trying to figure out, what did he mean by he's going to die, or when's that going to happen, or how's that going to happen. They're not talking about any of that. They're arguing. And they're not arguing about sports or politics or religion. They're arguing about which one of them is the greatest. You can imagine that sinking feeling that they have when they show up in the house and sit down, and Jesus looks at them all and says, So guys, what were you talking about on the way here today? And they all just sink back. Oh, whoops. We're busted, aren't we? But Jesus doesn't condemn them for wanting to be great. Instead, he uses this as a teaching opportunity to reveal to them what real greatness is. And the standard that Jesus lays out about greatness isn't what we might expect. Jesus doesn't say that the person who sells everything he has and gives it to the church or gives it to the poor, he doesn't say that that person is the greatest. Nor does he say that the person who prays 10 times a day facing Jerusalem, he doesn't say that that person is the greatest. Nor does he say that the one who travels all around the world preaching and teaching, he doesn't say that that person is the greatest either. No, the greatest, the first one in Jesus' kingdom, he says, is the last one. As he said it, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last. So you want to be great in Jesus' eyes? See yourself then as the least. So what Jesus does here is he takes our human concept of greatness and he flips it upside down. You see, we tend to think of greatness as doing the things that get noticed, or having the most people under your authority, or the most people who are listening to you, or accomplishing the greatest, the most notable results. But what Jesus teaches here is that greatness in God's kingdom involves none of that. Now, to be clear, greatness in God's kingdom, it does not mean moping around like some kind of a spiritual Eeyore, saying everybody's better than me, I'm so terrible, I don't matter at all. That's not what greatness is in God's kingdom. Greatness, as Jesus describes it here, is considering the needs and the concerns of the person who is least important in the eyes of the world as greater and more important than your own. And that's what he meant when he said, be the very last. It's an attitude thing. It's really seeing the world revolving around other people rather than thinking that the world revolves around you. But there's more yet to his definition. Jesus adds that the one who wants to be great must be the servant of all. And so being the servant of all means seeing people differently. See, normally, naturally, we tend to look at people for how they can bring us benefit in our lives. What I will get out of this relationship with this particular person. You know, maybe if I spend time with this person, I'll get some affirmation. Maybe I'll get a boost to my self-esteem and feel better about myself. Or maybe I'll be on the receiving end of some generosity. Or maybe I'll have a friend to watch the football game with now. But you see, if I see myself as the servant of all, that means that I cannot look at other people for what I will get from them. Rather, it means that I will look at other people for what I can bring to them, for how I can benefit them, for how I can help them, how I can be generous toward them, and how I can positively impact their lives. That's what it means to be the servant of all. And if this is true, as Jesus says, in our relationships with all people, then how much more is it Jesus' will in our relationships with our fellow Christians in the church? You see, we are here to serve, not for ourselves, but we're here to serve them, to help them, to guide them, to support them, and to love them. That's what we're here to do for our fellow Christians. Well, how do we do that? What I have this morning is four, I'll call them behaviors, four behaviors that show that a person puts other people first. They don't necessarily represent the whole picture, but what they do is they give us maybe a good start at what it looks like to put other people first. A good start of a picture of what it looks like to do what Jesus is telling his disciples here. So we have four ways to show other people that they are more valuable to you, that they are more important to you than you are. So the first of them is to listen. Listen to your fellow Christians. Listening to them means trying to see things from their perspective, to understand where they're coming from, and to do this especially if they have an opinion that's dramatically different than yours. Listen to them no matter how wrong, no matter how misguided, no matter how foolish you think they might be. Listen to them so well so that the next time you talk to somebody else, you could actually make that person's points for them in that next conversation. You could repeat what they said because you had listened so well. You see, so often we listen to reply rather than listening to understand. And when we do that, we're not so much listening to what the other person is saying as we're plotting out what's going to come out next from our mouth. Well, why do we do that? We do that because naturally we think that our own thoughts, our own opinions, our own perspectives and such are more valid and more important than others are. But you see, taking the time to listen to somebody else shows that they are important to you, shows that they are valuable to you because you're taking the time to see things their way. That's the first one. Listen to our fellow believers. The second one comes in the large area of life where God has given us no specific command, but at the same time, no specific prohibition either. And within that realm, and particularly when it comes to matters of personal preference, we can say to people, have it your way. Because when we say this to another person, it sends a powerful message. It tells them that the relationship, our relationship, is more important than me getting it my way. Now, we can have a hard time with this because it means giving up a degree of control. This may be a bit of a personal confession, but I'll tell you, I have a hard time being in a car when I'm the passenger and not the driver. Do you know why that is? Granted, sometimes it's worse than others, depending on who the driver is. But I know the reason that I feel that way is because at some level, I don't trust the driver to drive as well as I could drive that car. So I don't like it because I'm not in control. Well, we so easily do the same thing in our relationships, don't we? We only cede control in our relationships to the degree that we trust the other person to act in the same way that we would act, to do what we would do. But you see, showing the heart of a servant means saying, have it your way. Means saying to them, your happiness, your fulfillment, your satisfaction, that's all more important to me than my own opinions, my own tastes, my own preferences. It's basically saying to them, I trust you, so you can have it your way. A third attitude that shows a servant's heart is to rejoice in the successes and blessings of other people. And Jesus commands us to be happy with what we've been given, that's being content. And certainly do that, but also be happy with what they've been given. And even if what they have been given is more than what you've been given, even if what they have been given is what you've always wanted to have, be happy for them, rejoice with them. As an example of this happening in real life, and I'll reveal some of my bias here, but maybe you know who this guy is. Used to be quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. Used to be quarterback for them until, this guy showed up and took over and has them 9-1. Not that I'm bragging. But how did this guy react? He was happy for the other guy. He said, he's playing great. The team's winning. I'm happy for him. And he's been helpful to him. Helpful to him on the sidelines, in meetings, in practices, even though he knows that the other kid's probably taken his job away. What is that other than rejoicing in the successes of other people? But you see, we can have a hard time with this because we can so readily think of reasons that we are the ones who deserve the success. We are the ones who deserve the blessing more than other people do. We tell ourselves things like, well, I've worked hard for this. I've worked hard at this for years. I've worked tooth and nail, and I've grinded down to the bone working so hard. So I deserve this more than they do. Why do they have that instead of me? But you know what that attitude is? It's really envy. Envy comes from having an overestimated idea, an overestimated perspective of what we deserve. But if you keep in mind that really everything that we have in this life is more than what we deserve, then it's easier to rejoice in the successes of others. The final one is to pray. Pray for other people, but particularly focus on praying for them more than we pray for ourselves. So to pray for other people in that way involves knowing their situations, knowing what they need, knowing their struggles, knowing their stresses, knowing their challenges in life. You see, it's so easy to only even know what we need, to only know what I'm personally struggling with, or what I really want to happen in this situation or in that situation in life, and to forget about how others are affected by so many other things that are going on in a given day. So pray for others, know them, pray for them, bring their needs before God as well. Now, as I said, these are just 4 ways to show an attitude that thinks of others first. Certainly, we could spend lots of time today coming up with more, but I think if we do these 4, that's certainly off to a good start. But the real heart of this all comes down to another question, and that's the question of why. Why put others first? Why does Jesus direct us to do this? In my study for this sermon, I was put onto an article printed in the New York Times way back in 2007. Thanks to the glory of the internet, I could look it up. The article was called Happiness 101 and told the story of a college class where the students and the professor studied happiness, but they studied it from a secular scientific type approach. And so one observation made by the instructor as he watched the students and questioned them and their feelings about their behavior was that if you take the approach of life that just aims to be happy, to give yourself pleasure, then you wind up on what the instructor called the hedonic treadmill. You can see the word hedonism in there, so the treadmill of hedonism. In other words, if you live life just seeking pleasure, all that it leads you is wanting more pleasure. So you get addicted to pleasure. The more pleasure you have, the more pleasure you want, and so on. However, what the students found in that class was that the things that made them the most happy were not the things that gave them pleasure, but it was rather selfless acts of service. Examples the students gave, one of them gave a $50 tip to their server at a restaurant. Another one went and gave blood. Another one gathered clothing for a homeless shelter. And that's what they found made them happier. But the reason offered by the professor for why these acts made them happier was that he said, quote, there are ways of living that lead to better outcomes. If I would translate that maybe into more common English, it's doing good is good for you. So that when you lead an unselfish life, there are benefits to it. Think about that for a moment. If I lead an unselfish life to get the benefits, is that really leading an unselfish life? If I lead an unselfish life for the benefits, who am I really doing it for? I'm really just doing it for me. So if I'm serving and putting others first simply because it's good for me, then I'm not really serving them at all. I'm not putting them first at all. And so doing it to receive the benefits is not why Jesus tells us to do that. The real reason why comes back to Jesus himself. If there was ever a human being who walked this earth who deserved to be served every minute of his life, who deserved, to be wined and dined and to have glory and praise showered on him every moment of his life, it was Jesus. Both because of who he is the Son of God, but also because of the things that he did. How many people did he help? Feeding thousands of people, healing the sick, even raising the dead and so on. But what did Jesus do in spite of the fact that he rightly deserved all of that? He served. He served even the people who didn't serve him. And his serving led to him laying down his life and dying even for people who would not have died for him, including you and me. And why did he do it all? So that we would be set free from our slavery to sin, so that we would be truly, truly forgiven before God, and so that we would be delivered from death's grip forever. That's why he did it all, to save us. So how would you feel about somebody who saved you? Say you're drowning in the river and somebody dives in, they swim out, they grab you, they pull you back, and they save you. You'd be so happy, you'd be so thankful to that person, right? Now add another layer to that imagination. How would you feel about that person if they were severely injured while saving you? Say they had to lose a leg and have it amputated. How would you feel then? How would you feel toward that person then? You would feel in some way obligated to them, right? But not out of a sense of have to, not out of a sense of need, not out of a sense of guilt, but you would feel obligated to them out of love. You saved me. You lost your leg to save me. How can I ever repay you? And so imagine if you went to that person and said, how could I ever repay you? How could I ever show you my thanks? And they said, take care of my mother because now it's going to be really hard for me. You would all do that, right? No questions asked. Sure, I will take care of your mother. I will do whatever you need to do. Why? Because you're free, but you're still bound to this person out of love. And so in a similar way, because Jesus has bought you, because Jesus has set you free from sin, and he's done it at the cost of his own life. Yeah, we're bound to him. We're bound to him out of love. And when we say, Jesus, how could we ever thank you? He points us to others. He says, take care of them. Serve them. Love them as I have loved you. You see, Jesus, by laying down his life for me, has proven to me, and he's proven to you, that all of us, that we are worth everything to him. In Jesus, you have everything that you could ever want, everything that you could ever need in life, both now and forever, because he's given you an eternity where you're free from death, and it's all been given to you. So you don't need to serve others to get some kind of a reward from Jesus, because he's already given you the reward. He gives it to you by faith in him. At the same time, you don't need to serve to feel better about yourself, because honestly, what can make a person feel better than to know that the very Son of God thought you were valuable enough and important enough to come from heaven to earth to lay down his life for you? It doesn't get any better than that. So in Jesus Christ, I can simply serve. I can serve for their sake and not my own sake, which is exactly what Jesus did for me. You see, when we see all that Jesus has done for us, it has a way of turning us inside out. Instead of making us curved in on ourselves, it curves us out toward other people. It makes us concerned for others just like Jesus was. So then what does it mean to be a great Christian? The greatest Christian is the one who serves. The greatest Christian is the one who makes others feel valuable, makes others feel important, who makes others feel listened to. The greatest Christian is the one who rejoices in the successes of others and at the same time gladly sacrifices his own personal preferences for them. See, in Jesus Christ, we can put others first. We can serve them because that's exactly what our Savior has done for us.